I don't know. Did we talk about this when we were actually live or before that? You talked about being able to have like face-to-face discussions. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
we were
yeah.
already recording when we started that. Text is a really
Mm,
like interesting one because it's really useful and you can have very technical discussions with it. But the issue is oftentimes it ends up leading, especially if you're not being super clear, and sometimes it's hard to be super clear. It can lead to
yeah,
people misinterpreting what you're saying, and
100%.
especially if there's like it's you're not being completely positive about a project, you want something changed.
Yes. Yeah.
Depending
Yeah.
on how you phrase it, different people may interpret that in different ways. Like if you're being very straight to the point, this is a thing that a lot of people in Australia do. Like, will be very straight to the point,
Yeah.
absolute no nonsense about it. Some
No
people find that,
sugarcoating.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Some people find that really rude.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a great point. I had like a couple of notes about this. Yeah, text again, it's like it's really nice in a lot of ways because especially if it's different cultures, different languages, like it lets you do it asynchronously. I mean, of course you can have like real-time chat, but like if you're doing, social media or Reddit or whatever, like text is really powerful in that way because it gives you time to like think, process, translate or whatever, rephrase things. But yeah, it can lead like you. I think as somebody who reads text, your default is to just assume everybody has the same frame of reference as you,
Yeah.
and so that's you think like ah if somebody in my culture the way I talk said this, I would get offended because they didn't sugarcoat it or whatever. Whereas like if you're talking to somebody and it's like no, our culture is like we just don't sugarcoat. We're straight to the point. We're brutally honest or whatever, and like that could create a clash when you don't really see. I mean, as silly as it is, it's like you hear somebody with a different accent than your own, and like that in your brain that tells you something, right? That says, oh, there may be a cultural difference here, even if we're
Yep.
speaking the
Yep.
same language. There may be a cultural difference, or you're talking to someone who doesn't look like you. You're talking to somebody who I think that in-person thing just communicates so much more information about the other person and like facial expressions and everything like when you inflection, just all of that stuff that you don't get in text, I think can put a lot more meaning. And of course, you can still have misunderstandings in person, like that still happens. But I think the they're a lot less common when we can talk in person. Um, I have a fun example. I think I always talk about is my first Guadec that I went to. I
Mhm.
talked about this last time we were on too, but there was somebody who like it was pretty I don't want to say blunt. I don't know if that's the right word, but just like to the point
Sure.
in our communications online. And I only ever talked online, and like so some people in the community didn't really like them or whatever, and then like met them in person, and I was like, oh, this is like one of the friendliest, nicest people I've ever met, like genuinely nicest people ever.
Mhm.
And so that like it's just a totally different thing when you're just like some rando on a blog or on a an issue report versus talking face to face.
I think what the way that I would like to see people approach things is just if you're going to have a conversation like this, assume the person you're talking to has the best intentions. Like
Yeah,
there obviously comes a point where someone is clearly being a bad actor. Like they are not
right,
trying to
right.
have a good conversation here. They are trying to roll you up. Look, I'm at fault for that sometimes. I'm not going to say that I'm never at fault for that. Um, but if you go into these conversations with the best intentions, assuming the person is trying to be make progress here, like I think this is especially true in a project where it's like a it's like a meta project like Wayland, where you don't have
Mm,
one set of goals. You have all of these different individuals from all of these different desktops that have
yeah.
all of their own separate design guidelines and like UX experiences they want. Where you'll often see there's like clashes about super basic things. Like my favorite example right now is whether a application window should be able to set its icon, and
I
the
saw this.
children window should be able to set different icons from the parent. And this is
Yeah.
such a basic thing, but it's led to so much discussion. And I noticed that when FOSSDom happened, Matthias, the guy who's Matthias Klump, the guy who's like
Hmm.
started the issue, he was like, "Yeah, so we actually resolved like a bunch of these issues by just talking."
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how that happens, right? Like, and that's why I think the in-person conferences and meetups are so powerful. It's like people are energized when they go to them. They're excited to like do something new and interesting. They're excited to see people face to face. They get in a room, they realize that we're all on the same team, we're all friendly. Um, it's a combination of both doing like work and doing social and going out and getting a beer or whatever. It's like it's this really productive environment where you can just say, you know what? Okay, yeah, actually, like we might disagree about this thing, but like we agree that this is dumb to like hold up this project. Like let's just work on what we can together.
Yep.
Um, that's I like to say that a lot. Like even when you have projects that are competing in open source, you have cooperation is what I love to call it. Like you're cooperating together when it makes sense, and you're competing on what you think is the best vision for a thing. And like that's I think when open source is the most healthy is when you are working together as much as you can. When you're even when you have differences of opinions or differences of vision, work together on the things that overlap. Like
Yep.
even if you're not literally using the same code, like you a lot of times are solving the same problems. Like there's so many random examples, but like elementary and GNOME is a good example of this. Of like elementary is a downstream of GNOME, a lot of GNOME technologies, but doesn't use like GNOME shell. It uses GTK, but doesn't use Adwaita, and so there's overlap in approaches to things, even if it's not the same code. Like
Right.
GNOME shell learns from Gala, and Gala learns from GNOME shell, and like I think that's really healthy. And you can have those. You can say, hey, when we were solving this from a design perspective, like here's why we did it this way, and that might inform the other project, and that might make it better. They might have something interesting that informs how you do yours. And so I think that like that collaborating, even when you're not shipping the same thing, like even when you're not saying we're gonna write the same code base and both contribute to the same code base, it still is super super valuable to talk and to learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think where communication tends to break down, obviously there's a lot of other points, but the point where I think most people should probably agree it's just off the table is when you start bringing in personal insults. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that just is there is never a time where insulting someone's, like, okay, maybe there's a time where insulting someone's code works, but insulting insulting, like, I don't know, the state of their project, other things going on in the project, whether they should even be involved, like all of these things, just they do not help in any situation. If that's the route you're going, like you have to be prepared to just like end the conversation. Or like if your goal is just to remove someone from a project, like sure, whatever, but you're not going to have a productive discussion after this point.
Yeah. I think it's hard because it's a lot of times it's hard to understand and realize like what is personal.
Right.
I think a lot of people, especially in open source, especially when it's your like passion project, your pet project, like you feel very personally. Like it's if somebody says that your code is bad, it is easy as a person who wrote the code to say they are saying I am bad.
Right.
Or if somebody says that, your design, this design is ugly or I don't like it or whatever, it's really easy to take that personally.
Yeah.
And so that's I think the flip side of it is like, yeah, obviously you can't, like, personal attacks are dumb. Like don't I mean, attacks are dumb in general, but you don't talk about the person themselves.
Like bringing up someone's
keep
family,
it focused
for example,
on
things like that.
Yeah, or like, yeah, it's like keep it focused on the product. And I mean, when it's hard because again, like if you're talking about the governance of a project, it's like that's not necessarily personal, but it could be an interpersonal conflict or something.
Right.
Like
It might refer to like someone in leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard to kind of draw the line, I think. But yeah, I would say generally, like, yeah, if you're going to critique something, if you're going to talk about something, if you're going to criticize something, like keeping it focused on the objective, like product itself, I think is important. And then on the flip side, as somebody who, if you're receiving critique or receiving criticism or receiving commentary, just anything, like try to not take it too personally too. Like this person who's critiquing and or criticizing it is sharing their experience of like why they don't like this thing. They're not saying if they're saying you are bad and you should feel bad, then whatever. But like generally they're not. Like usually they're not. Yeah.